So, Scott, last time you were here, I feel like every time you're here, in between that time, there are a lot of things that happen in reference to foreign policy. So, a lot has happened since you were here last time. I guess I want to start with Ukraine. So recently, the Senate just passed the $95 billion bill for foreign aid, which includes Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. In reference to Ukraine, the big question I think a lot of people have is why, again, are we giving more money to Ukraine when it's very clear to those of us that have been paying attention that this war with Ukraine is already over, that obviously that Ukraine is not going to beat Russia, but here we are giving them more money. I want to get your take on that. Why are we still giving Ukraine money when we know for a fact that they cannot win this battle against Russia?
Well, the fact of the matter is, we never expected Ukraine to win this battle against Russia. Anybody who thought Ukraine could win this war should probably be drug tested. Although I understand that in many parts of the United States, it's legal to consume drugs. But you shouldn't make foreign policy decisions while under the influence of drugs. But it's never been the objective of the United States for Ukraine to beat Russia. In fact, if at the beginning of this conflict, the CIA briefed the president, 3-day war. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff anticipated the war to be over in a week. Nobody expected that Ukraine was going to outlast Russia. It wasn't until people misconstrued the Russian objectives in this. Russia called it a special military operation. And of course, we in the West, because we're overly politicized, says, no, it's an invasion. No, if it had been an invasion, it would have been over in 3 days or a week. It was a special military operation because Russia didn't want to defeat Ukraine. What Russia wanted was to get Ukraine to do that which the West wouldn't allow it to do, which is to say, we're going to be neutral. We're not going to join NATO. Crimea is cool, and we're not going to persecute the Russians of the Donbass. How do we know that? Because that's exactly what Russia did. Russia went in there in less than a week. Once they moved down to Kiev, once they took over large portions of Ukraine, Russia said, hey, let's go to the negotiating table. And the Ukrainian government looked around and said, yeah, we really don't have a choice at this point in time. So they went 6 rounds, finished up with something called the Istanbul Communique, which was this peace agreement. And I mean, in respect, at first, if you had told me about this without at the time, you said, this is what the Russians agreed to. I said, well, Russia must have lost the war because they gave everything to Ukraine. They just said, you can't be a member of NATO. Then they also said, Crimea is ours. But they said on the Donbass, it's not going to be yours, but there's going to be a referendum. We can't give the Donbass back to you because of the way you've abused the Russian people, but you change your constitution, you get everything back. Not only that, out of good faith, we're going to voluntarily withdraw our army from Kiev, from Chernihiv, from Sumy. We reduced our forces in Kharkiv by 50%. We're serious about this. We want peace. Oh, even though we said you can't join NATO, and this is the one that killed me, Article 5 protection will allow you to sign security guarantees with all of NATO. They give you Article 5 protection for everything but Crimea and the Donbass. Meaning that if we come in and we attack you here, it's like you're a member of NATO. They get to come in and protect you by law, by treaty. And I'm just going, that's insane. Why would Russia ever do that? Because Russia didn't want a war. Russia did everything possible to stop this war. But once it became clear, when Russia pulled back and did this, the West misconstrued this as a sign of weakness. And that's when they told the Ukrainians, don't accept the peace deal. We're going to give you $48 billion. Remember the Lend-Lease back in May of 2022? We're going to pump you full of weapons, and you guys can go and fight the Russians. But it was never, ever, and we know this because Lloyd Austin flew to Ukraine and went to Poland and said, all we want to do is hurt the Russians. What our strategic objective here is the strategic defeat of Russia, not to kick them out of Ukraine and all that, but to inflict so much harm on them that their military becomes demoralized, the people become demoralized, and they overthrow Vladimir Putin, because we were sanctioning them at the same time, trying to collapse their economy. So we were looking for Russia to collapse from within, not by the Ukrainians to beat them. Well, we misconstrued everything. We got it all wrong. Russian economy didn't collapse. The Russian army stood firm once they realized they'd been betrayed by the Ukrainians. They mobilized their defense industry. I just ran through some numbers today earlier in a conference I had. I'll just quick throw them out to your people so you understand what's going on here. Russia, when they started this conflict in 2022, had 900,000 men in their military. Russia today has 2.1 million men in their military. So for all the people that said Russia's weaker, Russia's this, Russia's that, but Russia's 2.1 million. Now, 600,000 though are unique only to the special military operation, reservists, etc. But fully 1.5 million is a new expanded army because of the way the West has behaved. Russia today is producing about 150 tanks. That number might be up closer to 200, and it's capable of going to 300 tanks a month. 300 tanks a month. The United States can produce 33 tanks a month. Wait a minute. The United States is the greatest military power in the world. And we don't even produce 33 tanks. We refurbish 33 tanks. The Germans can do 150 tanks a year. The French can do about 50 tanks a year. The British can do about 50 tanks a year. Basically, in 2 months, Russia outproduces all of NATO in tanks. Artillery shells. We can produce around 3 million a year. The Russians can produce around 24 million a year. Yes, they outproduce us all along the line. The United States Army, 425,000 strong. In 2022, we were saying that in order to keep this strength of 425, we needed to recruit 60,000 people. They could only recruit 45,000. So in 2023, they upped it to 65,000. They only recruited 50,000. Because they didn't have the manpower, they had to shrink the army by 24,000. So the U.S. Army shrank by 24,000, while the Russian army grew by 600, 2.19, 1.2 million. So anybody who thinks the Russians are weak and all this stuff, no, Russia has turned this thing around. Russia is in the driver's seat. Ukraine today has run out of manpower. This money we gave them, it's useless. Even Jake Sullivan said, we can give them all the weapons in the world, but if they don't have men to use them, it's no good. The Ukrainians have no men left. They did an emergency mobilization order. There's nobody. Everybody's running away. Nobody wants to fight. So while Ukraine, everybody's running away from the fight, Russia is getting 40,000 volunteers a month. Now let's talk about these volunteers. These aren't just young, stupid kids, because in America, after we do the USA thing, the vast majority of people that join are frat boys out of college and kids that, don't have a job, but they're sitting around and they're feeling a little, rough and tough, and so they join the military. The guys that join the Russian military are men in their 30s and men in their 40s. They all are well employed. They have families. So why would you leave a good paying job in a factory, a family, a house, a mortgage, kids, when you don't have to? Remember, they're volunteers. They're not being drafted. You want to know why? Because they are patriotic. Because all of Russia has woken up to the fact that the West is at war against Russia in Ukraine, and that this is their great patriotic war. Have you ever seen that movie Patton? When George C. Scott's character, what are you going to tell your kids? Where was Grandpa in the Great War? Shoveling poop in Louisiana. Well, you don't want to tell. So the Russians don't want to say, where were you in the Great War? They don't want to say, well, I was, doing information technology, or I was, doing this or that. They all want to say, hey, campaign medal. I was there. I was at the front. I was fighting for Russia. 40-year-old men who have are medically disqualified, meaning that they've gone to the recruiter, and the recruiter said, no, you can't because you're medically disqualified. They're paying out of their own money to go get surgeries, to go get this fixed, so they can go to the recruiter and say, here, I got it fixed. Please let me join. It is a disgrace. It is dishonorable in Russia not to be volunteering for this. And if you're not volunteering for the front, we have guys who are driving. The way the Russian thing works is, they get all the stuff they need but the war is changing. Right now, there's a lot of drones flying around. And a lot of these drones, aren't military grade drones because they just sort of grew from the grassroots. And so they're calling home saying, get us more drones. So communities are going and buying drones from China. They're getting like 10,000 of them. Then they stuff them into armored cars, and they get volunteers to drive them to the front lines. So guys are at home and they're saying, let's take the drones to the boys in the front. They're driving there. Every once in a while, bam, they get hit and die. So this is dangerous. All of Russia is mobilized. All of Russia is mobilized. Ukraine can't win this war. We gave the money away because we want them to kill to kill Russians. That's all this is about. And again, I just asked you, if you recall, in the summer of 2021, before the great American retreat from Afghanistan, there was a huge scandal. The Russians, it appeared, had bribed the Taliban to kill Americans. If you remember that, it never happened. It was total garbage. But all over New York Times, and they're so mad. And when you break the story down, it came down to one report of a Taliban bomb outside of Bagram Air Base where 3 Americans died. And they said, we believe that these guys who did this got money, and they had this convoluted money trail of the Russians to kill these 3 Americans, and we want to go to war against Russia. You're not allowed to kill Americans. America just gave Ukraine $60 billion to kill as many Russians as they can. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a Russian family. What do you think about America right about now? America started this war. America turned Ukraine against Russia. America has killed over 500,000 Ukrainians because we started this war. We're responsible for the deaths of nearly 100,000 Russians because we started this war. And now we just gave them $60 billion more to kill more Russians. And so now Scott Ritter, like the idiot he is, because I believe in peace, I'm going to go to Russia in June. I am going to Russia in June. And I'm going to travel around Russia, and I'm going to meet Russian families. And when I sit down with them, how are they going to look at me? I mean, how am I going to be able to sit down at the table with these people as an American, and they're going to go, hey, welcome to Russia, but isn't your government trying to kill our people? And what am I supposed to answer that? Oh, well, it's not me. I'm not. Well, aren't you an American citizen? Oh, yes, I'm very proud. Aren't you? Isn't America a democracy, representative democracy? Well, absolutely. So isn't the government held accountable to you for what they do in your name? Yes, I believe in that. So the government's killing Russians. What are you doing about it? Now, the answer is I'm here in Russia trying to make peace. But the point is, what an uncomfortable place to be. To be sitting across from Russians saying, yep, my government, it just gave those Nazis $60 billion to kill your husband, your father, your son. But the point is, Russia isn't going to lose this war. Ukraine isn't going to win this war. But we just keep throwing money away. 60 billion there, 20 some odd billion to the Israelis, a couple billion to Taiwan. And think of what it's about. 60.1 or 61 billion to the Ukrainians to kill Russians, 23 billion to the Israelis to commit genocide against the Palestinians, and a couple billion to the Taiwanese so they can commit suicide like the Ukrainians did and be part of a war. What does America do right? I would not be so angry. I still would be angry about the money because good Lord, just right down the road, we got crumbling infrastructure. I got homeless. We got a ghetto. We got everything, man. It could benefit from some money from the federal government to help the American people. I think the people in Flint, Michigan still have dirty water. I'm pretty sure all around the country we can point to problems that have been there for decades that could use an infusion of this capital. But I also understand that we need to promote goodwill around the world. We're supposed to be a world leader. So if we were giving the Ukrainians $60 billion to build schools, build infrastructure, do everything we're supposed to be doing here at home, at least I'd be saying, well, at least it's going to something good. So if I ever visited Ukraine, at least I could walk around with my head held high saying, hey, how'd that taxpayer money go? How you guys doing with America's money? Things are looking good? Yay, you love America because we're here to help you. We give you all the money that we need at home. If we went to the Israelis who were promoting Israeli-Palestinian rapprochement, joint education centers where the Palestinians grew up with the Israelis, where the walls came down, where communities came together, I'd go to Israel and Palestine and say, hey, how'd that money help out? You guys aren't killing each other anymore, right? Peace is breaking out all over. I'm feeling a little bit better. Yes, my bridges are still collapsing in Albany. They're still homeless and there's problems, but at least we did something good. The same thing with Taiwan. Hey, did we help you diversify your economy more so you guys who are already the richest economy in the world? Wait a minute. The richest economy in the world who have a surplus of money and we gave them money. Never mind. Taiwan, I'll never be happy about giving you money under any circumstance because you should be giving us money. But, we're the bankrupt nation, trillions in debt. You're the guys making all sorts of money. You make all those computer chips that make our phones and everything work. Roll some of that to us. We want a grant from Taiwan to America to make us feel better. But my point is, we're doing it to start war. All we do is have a policy based upon starting war and coercion. Right now, Blinken's in China. I'm all over the map here, but it's all related. Blinken's in China. Instead of sitting down with the Chinese and saying, hey, let's do diplomacy. Why don't we talk about this? Let's see what we can do. What do you think, guys? We can avoid. We come in. If you don't do it the way we want to do it, we're going to sanction your financial institutions. And the Chinese are like, Tony, see the hand? It ain't shaking. You see you threatened that with the Russians, right? How'd that go, Tony? Europe's economy has just collapsed because you sanctioned the Russians. What do you think is going to happen if you sanction China? Oh, the American economy is going to collapse in an election year, you idiot. But that's the whole point. All we know how to do is threaten people. So this 60, and here's the other sickening thing about this money. I think 48 billion of it rolls back to America. It doesn't go to Ukraine. It goes to American defense industry. And see, this was the selling point. And this is why I don't understand Americans didn't get it. Because everybody since said, look, this is good for the American economy. You see, 48 billion is going to come back and it's going to mean jobs. American jobs, and we're going to build weapons for America. And there's no, so you're going to extend the war in Ukraine that's already cost them 500,000 dead. You're willing to sacrifice another 100, 150, 200,000 Ukrainians for American jobs. How do you feel about that, America? Now that I told you what it's really about, all those jobs you're going to get, all that money, that Christmas bonus, it's going to be because 200,000 Ukrainian families had to put a loved one in the ground.
Yep.
Put that in your Christmas, coffee and drink it. America sucks as a country right now. And I have to tell you, the American people suck because we're letting this happen. I mean, I know there's people out there demonstrating, but not about Ukraine. There's no demonstrations about Ukraine. There are a handful of people. You and I are going to talk about it, but the American people who say we believe in things, we believe in doing the right thing, we believe in freedom. You don't believe in anything except getting rich. You don't believe in anything except getting a bigger payday. You don't believe in anything except accumulating comfort. You want the U.S. government to wrap you in a cocoon of comfort, inject you with the feel-good sauce, and you're just going to sit there and rock around and feel good. And as long as they keep doing it, it doesn't matter how they justify it. Money to Ukraine, money to Israel, money to Taiwan. You don't care. You don't. We don't care. But unfortunately, the rest of the world does. And there will come a day when America is going to find it difficult to get a seat at the table. It's like we're going to show up at the table and no one's going to get up and offer us a seat. No one's going to even turn to look at us. They're just all going to turn their back to us and ignore us, as we deserve to be ignored, because all we stand for is death and destruction. We don't stand for anything good anymore. None of the principles and values that ostensibly define us as a nation. We don't stand for any of that.
That's a really good point. Let me for just a second. That's a really good point, Scott. And I just want to ask you this question. I know you said you're going to go visit Russia in June. Are you concerned that you may be detained when you try to come back to the United States? And I'm asking just because I know that's happened to Fiorella, and I know Tara Reid is in a very troubling position right now. She is kind of stuck in Russia, went there for a book tour, and then was told by Representative Matt Gaetz that if she were to return to the United States, that she would probably be detained. Are you concerned about that, or are you just kind of like, whatever, fuck them?
Well, I mean, I have a family and I have responsibilities. So the last thing I want to do is end up being detained. And this will be my third trip in a year. I went last May for a month. When I came back, I was stopped for a number of hours and questioned extensively before they returned my passport, shook my hand and told me, welcome to America. I went again in December and January for a lengthy tour that took me through some controversial areas like the Donbass and Crimea. I gave a speech before 25,000 Chechen soldiers that got a lot of attention. So I thought for sure I was going to get some special treatment. They made me sit down for an hour, handed me my passport, shook my hand, said, welcome to America, welcome home, and sent me on my way. This trip, there's nothing controversial about it, which probably means they're going to shoot me upon arrival. But there's nothing controversial about this trip. I'm literally going, we're going to go to 16 different cities throughout. The motto of this trip is from the Pacific Ocean to the Baltic Sea and everything in between. And we are going to places that most Americans won't have heard of. And that's why we're going to expose Americans to this. We're going to meet with Russians, have town hall meetings. We're going to introduce Americans. We're reaching out to peace activists across the country to get a list of people who would like to have Russian pen pals. In each city, we're going to find Russian families, and we're going to match them up with an American family. We're going to have a satellite hook up there and let the first call be on us, put them together, let them talk, and then we're going to try and create this connectivity that needs to be happening so that people stop fearing Russia and Russians stop fearing America. There's nothing, no one could say, well, you're doing something that's against America. Really? Making friends is against America? I thought that's what we were supposed to be about. No, this trip is it's the purest kind of trip imaginable, truly designed to be people's diplomacy. We're not trying to change American policy. We don't care. I mean, we do care, but we're not there to, policy discussions. We're there to, hey, take Ivan, meet Frank. Frank, what's your wife's name? Melissa, meet Svetlana. You got kids. Here's little Yvonne, and there's little Frankie, and they're going to talk and say hi. And then at the end, after 10 minutes, we're going to go, okay, you each got the contact information. Shaka, brother, let's go. And we're going to move on to the next city, and we're going to do the same thing all over again. The idea is to break down the barriers of ignorance and fear by getting people to talk to one another. If the U.S. government wants to pull me aside and detain me for this, God bless them. I'm game. But I don't think they're going to, because I'm not, I can't speak. I don't know anything about what Tara, her situation. I trust all these people when they got pulled over that they felt afraid, and maybe they had cause to feel afraid. I'm not afraid, because in my heart of hearts, I know that there's literally no controversy here. I mean, if the U.S. government wants to make a big deal out of free speech and trying to improve people-to-people relations, that's on them, not on me. I'm not going over there trying to cut a secret deal or, open up a secret business or anything like that. I'm simply trying to make peace break out all over. I hope it succeeds, and I hope I don't get detained. But if I do, hey, to the Customs and Border Patrol guy that's listening to this right now, writing down notes saying detain Ritter, at least, could you guys have a Diet Coke there for me? Because if you're going to hold me for a couple hours, I do get thirsty, and you're going to, I'll talk, my throat will get sore, but, come on, scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But, I'm not worried about it.
Okay, cool. I was just checking. But I want to talk about this really quick too, as well. Zelensky was recently on Meet the Press, like right after this aid was announced. And I'm starting to notice now, even mainstream media is starting to question him a little bit more harshly about what is the plan here. So I want to play his response here, where he gets a little bit of pushback from Meet the Press.
All the others.
President Zelensky, can you give Americans a sense of the timeline? Will you still need as much aid this time next year? Or do you think you can turn the corner on Russia? What's the timeline?
Well, it depends on when we actually get weapons on the ground, as you said it, Christian. If we get it in half a year, well, we've had the process stalled for half a year, and we had losses in several directions. The losses in men, in equipment. In the East, it was very difficult. And we did lose the initiative there. Now, we have all the chance to stabilize the situation and to overtake the initiative. And that's why we need to actually have the weapon systems. When we get it, when we have it in our arms, then we do have the chance to take this initiative and to move ahead and to protect Ukraine. But giving you a specific timeline of the war, well, it depends on how soon we get this aid. There are so many variables, so many factors, and sometimes when we protect the important line, you retreat because you don't have enough forces and equipment, and then retaking that line would take 2 or 3 times more. I'm not saying that this is how it's going to end up, but things are possible, and I can give you an example with F-16.
And we'll go ahead and stop there. But I wanted you to hear that part there because it's very obvious that he was not giving her a definite answer. He doesn't really have a timeline because he knows that he cannot win this war. Even other people that are around Zelensky, it was reported last year that he is delusional. This is what people around him are saying. He's delusional and he knows there's no way. We've already lost this. What do you think is going to happen going forward? Do you see Zelensky actually sticking around and being a part of this for the next year? Or do you have a feeling that at some point Zelensky is going to take off? He's just going to run away and leave Ukraine, and Ukraine is just going to be left, to fight on its own accord?
Zelensky made a decision not to hold presidential elections or parliamentarian elections, which were supposed to take place this year. He claims that the Constitution allows him to stop elections because of a time of war. That's a interesting interpretation of the Ukrainian Constitution and an interesting interpretation of principles of democracy. For people, without getting into the nuances of the Ukrainian Constitution, Abraham Lincoln held elections in the middle of the Civil War against General McClellan. Very contested elections. Franklin Delano Roosevelt held an election in 1944, winning an unprecedented fourth term, sworn in 1945. Democracies hold elections. Winston Churchill lost an election at the end of the Second World War while he was in Potsdam negotiating with Stalin and Roosevelt about how to bring into the war. The Brits held an election. So the concept that you can't have an election in wartime is stupid. On May 20th, his term expires. And it'll be interesting to see how Ukraine treats him and how the world treats him. Russia's already said that he won't, in their eyes, he won't be the president of Ukraine. That raises another question. If he's no longer a head of state, can Russia kill him? Because Russia's pretty much said, we're not going to kill a head of state. But if he's no longer a head of state, can they kill him? I don't know. I would hope they wouldn't. I don't think we need to be in the business of knocking off political leaders. But, it doesn't matter what he thinks. I read an interesting article the other day where they said Ukraine will be able to resume the counteroffensive, the one that they did last year where everybody died. They'll be able to resume that counteroffensive by 2026. I'm like, if you think there's going to be Ukraine in 2026, you got problems. The Russians are confident that there will be major changes to the military map by May, June. They envision a collapse of the Ukraine. It's happening today. I mean, I opened up all my Telegram accounts today and went through them, and everywhere I looked, the Russians were advancing here, advancing there, took another city here, took another village there. There's no place on the battlefield where the Russians were retreating. The Russians are advancing. They destroyed another Ukrainian brigade that the Ukrainians can't replace. That's one thing Zelensky didn't talk about. All this equipment he gave them, where are the men? You don't have any men left. And the other Russians, in addition to saying the battlefield will dramatically change, they believe that the politics of this war dramatically changes by the end of summer, early fall. And when you say the politics, that this war is over, that basically Ukraine will have to agree to unconditional surrender, and that the Russians, as part of the terms of the stopping this, will denazify. That means get rid of the Zelensky regime, send him to his mansion in Miami. And also demilitarize. There will be no more Ukrainian army. There will be a Ukrainian government that the Russians approve of, and that's that. Now, will this money that they just received delay this a little bit? It could. I mean, it doesn't matter how you put it. With $13.8 billion, is $13.8 billion. That's a lot of money. It can buy a lot of stuff. It can create a lot of hate and destruction. But it's not enough to turn the tide of this war. The Russians have superiority or supremacy across the battlefield, and the tragedy is that the Ukrainians are dying at a rate that approximates about 1,000 guys a day. In Vietnam, the war that broke America's back, at the height of the Vietnamese War, we were losing 200 guys a week, and that broke our back. 200 body bags coming home in a week, and it killed us. Ukrainians are burying 1,000 guys a day. Again, I asked the Americans who gave the money over there, why? Because all you did is guarantee more dead Ukrainians. The Russians right now have the lowest casualty rate than at any time in the war. All those people out there saying the whole purpose is to kill Russians, understand this. We don't kill that many Russians anymore. Oh, yes, Russians die. There's no doubt about it. Yes, there's videos out there that show the Russians dying, but they're not dying 1,000 a day. The Russians might be losing 30 to 50 a day. Still a lot, because 30. Let's say it's 50 a day. 7 days. That's 350 body bags a week. That's 150 more than the 200 that broke the back of America in Vietnam. So the Russian people are burying 350 of their boys a week. That's a lot over time. But their spirit is unmatched. Their spirit is unbroken. And the Ukrainians, on the other hand, they can't get anybody to join. They have to go out and kidnap people to join their military. So, it is what it is.